The international agenda today is unforgiving. 2 wars, conflict in the Middle East, ongoing threats of violent extremism and nuclear proliferation, global recession, climate change, hunger and disease, and a widening gap between the rich and the poor.
The rich and the powerful, and they have blinded us to the truth.
The question is, do we all work for central bankers? That's what I want to address to our guest tonight.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep.
An estimated 50 to 70 million Americans suffer from a sleep disorder or sleep deprivation.
Whenever you meet a ghost, don't run away. Because the ghost will capture the substance of your fear and materialize itself out of your own substance. And will kill you.
The census numbers prove the United States has the biggest gap between rich and poor compared to all westernized countries today.
Greetings, citizens. The European takeover Nazi Party was evident in a long-range plan in 1941.
In Dresden, Germany at that time, there was a little-known Nazi research institute, which essentially drew up the blueprint for what we now know as the Brussels EU. The head of this institute was a man called Arno Zolter. In 1941, Zolter summarised the Nazi plans for post-World War II Europe in a book titled The Greater Sphere Cartel, an instrument of industrial market order in a new Europe. Astonishingly, Zolter's book describes all the key elements that we see around us in the Brussels EU of today. It describes what we now know as the European Commission, for example, the unelected executive body of Europe. It outlines the system of Brussels EU directives, the system by which laws are made in Europe today and handed down to the Brussels EU member countries to implement into their national laws. And it talks about implementing a master agreement to govern the details of any ongoing changes in European law. This master agreement eventually took shape and form in something we now know as the Lisbon Treaty, which became law in Europe in 2009. You can learn more about all of this in our book, The Nazi Roots of the Brussels EU. First published 6 years ago, the book is now available in 12 languages.
Lord Peter Carrington was a Nazi who led the Panzer Grenadiers, early member of the Stab Nazi Party, and SS Nazi troopers. Prince Bernhard founded the Bilderbergs. Carrington and Byrd subverted the war, employing other double agents within the Allies like Christian Lindemann, known as King Kong Rizzo.
Bernhard, super traitor, sending in King Kong, that sort of thing, with his nose in the Allied High Command well before the battle.
As explained in our most previous video, Nazi Germany continued on in the business elite unimpeded by the end of the war.
A kind of Fourth Reich is being created, which is a financial empire. It's not tanks anymore.
1943 War and Peace Study Group of the Council on Foreign Relations of the United States developed the Marshall Plan with a fraction of the FDR reparations to Russia which were never paid by Truman. Truman instead bombed Japan simply for leverage with Russia, as Japan 2 weeks prior started initiating surrender. This new plan was in Marshall OSS psyop with Western Europe to make Cold War starting the military-industrial complex warned by Eisenhower in his farewell address. By 1954 those forces crafted the CIA featuring Nazi money laundering lawyers and the Bilderbergs as the center of the SS elite. As this SS had done with business boards, Jews were inserted to take prying eyes from a continued Nazi agenda. The Bilderberg Hotel was where the German troops celebrated their last major victory, where 10,000 British fell. Just as psychopaths return again and again to the scene of their crime, and Prince Bernhard returned to Oosterbeek at the Bilderberg Hotel. What started with the Bilderberg's Action Committee for a United Europe became soon the Treaty of Rome, creating a European Union ironically controlled by enemy intelligence they had just finished fighting.
You see, The Brussels EU isn't a democracy. It's a dictatorship. The people of Europe have neither control over the executive level of the Brussels EU, nor even over the legislative process. Even the Brussels EU Parliament has no means of effectively controlling these things either, because unlike in a democratic parliament, the Brussels EU version has no right for independent lawmaking.
The directors of UNESCO, also Council of Rome and Constance in the Bilderbergs, formally decided with the European Council of Eugenics to start crypto-eugenics, which would be less identifiable.
The elitist views of Huxley and Ilk are reflected in the agenda of UNESCO, which seeks to create a collectivist world culture where the primary purpose of the people is to serve the state. Individualism and free thought is an obstacle to this agenda. Educational curriculum in the United States and across much of the world is being formulated according to the worldview seen fit by UNESCO. This explains why education has drifted away from emphasis on academics and in favor of Skinnerian behavioral indoctrination. While the primary focus of education is America used to be a reading, writing and arithmetic, the focus now is on the rejection of truth and absolutes in favor of tolerance, situational ethics and consensus. Internationalism over nationalism. Modern education's focus is on elimination of individualism in favor of collectivism, creating a society of predictable automatons that are incapable of thinking for themselves. Doing and thinking only are told by the so-called experts.
Meanwhile, EU continued the slow subversion of Western European culture.
Unrealised by many British people, however, the so-called European arrest warrant, passed by the Brussels EU in 2002, has essentially repealed habeas corpus in Britain. And the Lisbon Treaty, signed in Europe in 2007, repealed not only Magna Carta's protections against arbitrary and capricious rule, but also the very sovereignty of the British Parliament itself.
NATO serves as the military arm of this EU oligarchy of 28. SS troops were the precursor to what NATO perfected. And Trump, who got in promising to deal severely with NATO, backtracked as soon as he got face to face with the real deep state in power.
US President Donald Trump has backtracked on his campaign trail criticism of NATO. It's no longer obsolete, he said, of the 28-member organisation.
Today many of the biggest corporations are SS engineered.
All right. Well, he says he was a German chemist and a Nazi war criminal. Now, when you were telling me about leaders of Bayer being authentic and smart, did you know about Fritz Tamir?
I've never heard this name before.
And so, did you know, ma'am, that Fritz Tamir, after he was released from prison for being a Nazi war criminal there at Auschwitz, that he became a supervisory board chairman of Bayer. Did you know that? Would you go up on this? So I don't think she's ever seen this before. So if you would, Corey, you see, there you go. Look, Corey, right here. There you go. It says Fritz Tamir also worked for Bayer and later IG Farber. He was involved in the planning of Monowitz concentration camp, a satellite camp of
And a German and Jewish elite operate the greatest powers of the world from the Bilderbergs, like Audrey Azoulay, Director General of UNESCO, or Dimas Hassabis from Google's DeepMind project, both attendees of the 2018 Bilderberg meeting.
Google recently acquired DeepMind. DeepMind has been very successfully developing AI that can think for itself, and beyond. When strong AI and the technological singularity does arrive, will it be given human rights, or robot rights? More importantly, how will those rights be enforced? By what earthly authority?
We are not Jesus. Nor do we have Alzheimer's. Expect us.
Last night I dreamt about how things were. And I woke up here.
The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.